Chapter 7, Section 1, The Early Years of the War. The main idea behind this section is that the American desire to gain rights and liberties led them to fight for their independence from Britain. Why it matters today is that those same rights and liberties are protected by the U.S. Constitution for American citizens. Key terms and names that have been defined for you through the Google Classroom: George Washington, mercenary, strategy, rendezvous, and the battles of Saratoga. Please make sure to have your Google Doc open through the Google Classroom as you watch this video and complete the table or questions as the video progresses. One American story. In search of liberty, Haym Salomon moved from Europe to New York sometime between 1764 and 1775. He was a Jew from Poland. Salomon soon became a successful merchant and banker. During the war, Salomon supported the Patriot cause. When the British captured New York in 1776, many patriots fled, but Salomon stayed. The British arrested him. Salomon spoke many languages. The British thought he could help them deal with foreign merchants, so they let him out of prison. Salomon used this opportunity to help other prisoners escape. In 1778, the British wanted to arrest him again, so he fled to Philadelphia and continued to aid the patriots. He loaned the new government more than $600,000, which was never repaid. Like Salomon, many people made hard choices about which side to support during the Revolutionary War. This section discusses those choices and the obstacles Americans faced in the war's early years. Americans divided. The issue of separating from Great Britain divided American society. Opinion polls did not exist in the 1700s, so we don't know exactly how many people were on each side. But historians estimate that roughly 20 to 30% of Americans were loyalists. Roughly 40 to 45% were patriots, and the rest remained neutral. Most Americans did not support the Revolution. Both patriots and loyalists came from all walks of life and all parts of America. In general, New England and Virginia had high numbers of patriots. Loyalists were numerous in cities, in New York State, and in the South. Many loyalists worked for the British government or were clergy in the Church of England. In other words, they were ministers in the Anglican Church. Some Quakers were loyalists, although many just wanted peace because their faith taught that war and all violence was wrong. The war divided Native Americans too. For instance, some Iroquois nations fought with the British and others with the Americans. Those Native Americans who joined the British feared that if Americans won, they would take Native American land. And of course, we would never force them further and further west till we pushed them off the entire continent. Some Native Americans who lived near colonists and interacted with them sided with the Americans. African Americans also fought on both sides. At first, slave owners feared that African Americans who had guns might lead slave revolts. Therefore, few states allowed African Americans to enlist or sign up with the army. Then, a British governor offered freedom to any enslaved person who joined the British Army. Many slaves ran away to fight for the British. In response, most states began to accept African American soldiers. In all, about 5,000 African Americans served in the Continental Army. Many African Americans who did so hoped that American independence would bring greater equality. Differences over the war split families too. For example, Benjamin Franklin's son, William, who was the royal governor of New Jersey, therefore a loyalist, took Britain's side. The father and son stopped speaking for the rest of their lives. Creating an army. Because not everyone supported the war, raising an army was difficult. The army also faced other problems. In June of 1775, George Washington became the commander of the Continental Army. At first, this new national army was formed from state militias, made up of untrained and undisciplined volunteers. After Congress created the Continental Army, men began to enlist, but most of them didn't stay long. At the start of the war, Congress asked men to enlist only for 1 year. Later, Congress did lengthen the term of service. When the soldiers' time was up, they went home. As a result, Washington's army never numbered more than 17,000 men. Congress's inability to supply the army also frustrated Washington. The soldiers needed everything: blankets, shoes, food, and even guns and ammunition. Angrily, Washington wrote, "Could I have foreseen what I have and am likely to experience, no consideration upon earth should have induced me," meaning persuaded me, "to accept this command." Many women tried to help the army. Martha Washington and other wives followed their husbands to army camps. The women cooked, did laundry, and nursed sick or wounded soldiers. A few women even helped fight. Mary Hayes earned the nickname Molly Pitcher by carrying water to tired soldiers during a battle. Deborah Sampson, dressed as a man, enlisted and fought in several engagements. Building an army was crucial to Washington's plan. To the British, the Americans were disorganized, inexperienced rebels. The British thought that if they won a decisive battle, the Americans would give up. By contrast, Washington's main goal was to survive, to complete hit-and-run attacks, and to keep on the move. To do so, he needed to keep an army in the field, win some battles, no matter how small, and avoid a crushing defeat. He knew that as long as he had an army, the revolution would go on. He knew he could not hope to win a major battle, though, until he had a large, well-equipped army. Struggle for the Middle States. As Chapter 6 explained, Washington had forced the British to retreat from Boston in March of 1776. He then hurried his army to New York City, where he expected the British to go next. One British goal was to occupy coastal cities so their navy could land troops and supplies in those cities. From there, they could launch their military campaigns. Washington's hunch was correct. In July of 1776, Britain's General William Howe arrived in New York with a large army. Then, in August, more soldiers arrived, including about 9,000 Hessian mercenaries. A mercenary is a professional soldier hired to fight for a foreign country. British soldiers usually signed up for life, which discouraged enlistment. So Britain needed mercenaries whom it hired from the German states. For several months, the British and American armies fought for New York State. Finally, the British forced Washington to retreat through New Jersey. By December, when the American army crossed the Delaware River into Pennsylvania, it was in terrible condition. Charles Willson Peale, a Philadelphia painter who watched the crossing, saw one muddy soldier who, quote, had lost all his clothes. He was in an old, dirty blanket jacket, and his beard long, and his face so full of sores he could not clean it. To Peale's shock, the soldier called his name. He was Peale's brother. Political writer Thomas Paine also witnessed the hard conditions and the soldiers' low spirits on the retreat. To urge them to keep fighting, Paine published the first in a series of pamphlets called The American Crisis. Quote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman." So we take a look at this when he describes the times that try men's souls, meaning these are the difficult times. And he says the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot, the fair weather fans, in other words, in crisis when times get tough, will shrink from the service of their country. They no longer support their country, only when times are good. That's why they're called sunshine soldier, sunshine patriot, or summer soldier. But he that stands it now when times are tough are the ones who truly deserve the praise and thanks of man and woman, because they are the true patriots for sticking with it when times were tough. Washington hoped that a victory would encourage his weary men. He also knew that he must attack the British quickly because most of his soldiers would leave once their enlistments ended on December 31st. Late on December 25, 1776, Washington's troops rode across the icy Delaware River to New Jersey. From there, they marched in bitter, early morning cold to Trenton to surprise the Hessians, some of whom were still sleeping after their Christmas celebrations. The Americans captured or killed more than 900 Hessians and gained needed supplies. Washington's army won another victory at Princeton 8 days later. These victories proved that the American general was better than the British had thought. The American army began to attract new recruits. This is the end of Part 1. Please make sure you have completed answers to the Google Doc that accompany Part 1. And as you finish out the questions that go with Part 2, make sure you submit when you have finished. And once you have done that, we will see you in class tomorrow.